Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates. Hello everyone and welcome to the weekly edition of Daily News Simplified, where we take up the entire week of Indian Express Explained section and the Sunday edition of the Hindu newspaper. Articles which have been taken up for today's discussion are listed on your screen, and the timestamping for all these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. This article of Indian Express Explained section appeared on 23rd of May. Article talks about the current reasons behind the food inflation that is going on in India. Now the point is that this article has highlighted those issues which were not mentioned in the articles that we have discussed in the previous few weeks. India is going through the intensive inflation this time, and the inflation here simply means the inflation in food and fuel. The reason behind the fuel inflation is straightforward, the reason being the excise duty imposed by center and the state. On the other hand, there are reasons of food inflation as well. There are global reasons. War is going on between Ukraine and Russia, one of the top exporter of important food items. Then there are issues in Malaysia as well with respect to the oil palm. But what about the food inflation as of now compared to what we have observed a decade ago? The article has actually talked about this basic difference of the food items and their inflation. So let us go through the important elements mentioned in the article. The article has highlighted that between September 2021 to April 2022, that is the span period of almost 8 months, Consumer Price Index, that is the price finally paid by each consumer, the goods they actually bought. This CPI has increased from 0.68% to 8.38%, which is very high number given the kind of economy with high informalization India has. On the other hand, some international organizations like United Nations and Food and Agriculture Organization has stated that food price index globally has remained highest since the decade of 2000. That is between 2000 to 2010. The inflation on food items was ever highest. And this is the second time after one decade that we are going through the same problem at global level. Now, the article has actually compared the inflation of the decade in 2000 and the inflation which is going on right now in India. So, from the perspective of UPSC, in the prelim examination as well as for the macro understanding of how inflation actually works, there are two kinds of objects you need to remember. The first one is the demand pull inflation and the second one is cost push inflation. Article has actually called about both kind of inflations but respected to the food items in India. The inflation in the decade of 2000 was structural, demand-led and income-rising inflation. It simply means the economy was gradually shifting from industrial growth to the service sector growth because this decade saw one of the highest service sector growth, that too in the double digit. So that kind of inflationary pressure was first because of the structure. As income of the people was rising, so was their demand. So demand was rising both in urban and the rural area. Hence, the inflation in the decade of 2000 in food item was mostly the demand pull inflation. The one interesting observation which was also highlighted in the article says that the cereals and the sugar inflation was less than that of the protein inflation. Now, the first cause was demand was high because of rising income. Now, this demand was seen with respect to the food items, that too in the case of protein. For example, milk, eggs, meat and others. So the demand of rising food items with respect to the protein-led inputs was rising more than that of cereals such as wheat or even the high carbohydrates such as sugar inflation. The thing have changed now. Now, the inflation is more idiosyncratic. It simply means of peculiar nature. The economic scientist and the analyst are now confused about how come India is shifting despite higher income from protein inflation to the calorie inflation. Now, this is the peculiar nature of inflation right now. The current inflation is the supply shock driven or the supply shock inflation. It simply means that now we are moving towards the cost push inflation altogether. The supply shock as of now has been caused because of the Ukraine and Russian war. So there's a lack of supply of rice from Ukraine, corn, barley from Russia, and wheat from both these countries. We are also going through the issues of limited import on palm oil from Malaysia. So overall, globally, the supply has reduced vis-a-vis the stationary demand. And this has led to the demand and supply gap, causing the inflation of scarcity. The another side of this current inflation is that calorie inflation is more than the protein inflation. The demand of rice, wheat, sugar is more than that of the protein items such as milk, eggs, or meat. So the nature of inflation now has reversed from what we have observed during the decade of 2000. Still, the economists have argued that we are not importing any inflation. Why? The reason being simple, importing inflation simply means that we are buying those products where the international prices are high. So if we are buying those food items which have higher prices at the international market, the term which we used is the imported inflation. But right now, India is not importing inflation. Because of the Ukraine-Russia war, the prices in India is not much higher. Then why do we have inflation in India, especially in calorie section? The reason being simple, that because of the heat wave and the crop damage, the prices of cereals have increased drastically. What government has done in this regard, that given the kind of limited supply we have in the current financial year, government has now reduced or has banned the export of wheat to the other countries. Because of this, the supply would be equal to the demand created in the economy, and in the short term, maybe in 3 or 4 months, we'll be able to control the inflation in the calories section altogether. Now, if you go through this important diagram, this has highlighted the demand pull and cost push inflation. In the demand pull case, you'll find that the demand has increased in the economy from 81 to 82. Consequently, there was a rise in the prices as well, and there was rise in the national output. Now, why? Because of the rising prices, there is national output increase. The reason being simple, when the producer get more on each and every sale, they are incentivized to employ more people, produce more output, and sell more output in the market. So demand pull inflation creates more demand and expansion of national output. On the other hand, if there is a cost push inflation in the economy like we are having right now, what happened? The supply actually reduces. It causes the increase in the prices because now we have the scarcity. But as supply has reduced, so producers are not incentivized to raise their output. They are just selling off whatever they are having right now in their inventories. So the national output would fall. Now this simply means that there is stagflation, there is stagnation, and there is inflation. So please do remember both these diagrams for your prelims as well as mains examination to make the inflationary understanding more clear. With this discussion, please, now I will leave you this practice question. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of Indian Express Explains section was published on 24th of May and talks about the relevance of ASHA workers, their successful public health experiment in the village community. The article has highlighted the importance of ASHA workers in providing the grassroots level health facilities to Indian population with special targets toward the females. Apart from that, article has also called for improving the remuneration, especially the monetary remuneration to these women who are working as ASHA workers. Now, ASHA has already been asked by the UPSC in 2012 prelim examination. But for the future time, we'll take up the ASHA workers in length and breadth. We'll try to analyze how this ASHA model is working in India with detailed analysis of their functionality and components. Then we will compare ASHA workers with the other kind of workers such as A&M workers. So let us start with the ASHA worker first. Now, World Health Organization has already recognized over 1 lakh ASHA workers and their important contribution in controlling the COVID-19 crisis. A writer of this article has also called for increasing the monetary compensation to the ASHA workers. Now, what is ASHA? ASHA stands for Accredited Social Health Activist. These are the female worker. They are trained female workers and they form a specific committee as an activist. One female health worker works almost for 200 households in a particular village. They are part of national program and they cover both communicable and non-communicable diseases. They are local resident, they are mostly literate. In rarest of the rare case, we'll find some less literate workers also. The age criteria is preferable to 25 to 45 years of age. In rural areas, they are selected from each village. In urban areas, they are selected from the vulnerable areas or slum areas. So in urban areas, we will not find ASHA worker taken from a rich neighborhood. So they are always taken from backward areas, vulnerable areas, slum areas where they can actually accommodate, and it also provides the alternative earning facilities to these workers. They are given the performance based incentive, which was also the core area on which this article was highlighted. They are provided 2,000 rupees minimum monthly compensation and also based on their performance in their specific areas. All states in India and union territories have the functional ASHA workers except the state of Goa and union territory of Chandigarh and Puducherry. They are represented at the local level with local population. So let's say there is a high degree of a particular community, a particular sections or a class of people living in a particular village. So that community will be represented by the ASHA workers so that the social fabric is not disturbed by the functioning of ASHA workers. Then they are also provided with the insurance benefit, and the minimum criteria for selecting the ASHA worker would be that one ASHA worker would be selected for 1,000 people covering almost 200 households. But in this category, the rural area would form almost an area with a population of up to 50,000. So do not get confused with the criteria of Census of India for determining rural and urban. If an area has a population of 49,000, that will be considered to be a rural area, and in that particular area 49 ASHA workers will be allocated. In urban areas, one ASHA worker will be given for 1,000 to 2,500 people for serving purposes. Now let us look into the important structure of rural health missions functioning in India. Now as of now, we are going through the National Health Mission and their important components, but previously it was highlighted in the following method, which is given on your screen. At national level, we have health policies, population policies, which are administered by the Union Minister of Ministry of Family Health and Welfare. In this, we have reproductive and child health associated with National Rural Health Mission. So now we have National Health Mission. Previously, it was National Rural Health Mission, focusing on reproductive and child health care. On the other hand, we have Ministry of Women and Child Development, that is functioning towards the integrated child development scheme. So more or less, both the ministries are working towards the nutritional benefits and ease of birth provided to women in rural and urban areas. So at the national level, we have policy groups, we have National Steering Committee, Program Coordination Committees. And at the state level, we have the similar kind of structure. We have steering committees, convergence committees, but here state ministers are more responsible for the implementation of these programs. At district level, district magistrate is not responsible. Then who is responsible? The chief medical and health officers, as well as the project directors and deputy directors, are responsible for implementing both these schemes. At block level, we have chief medical officer, and at sectoral level, we have primary healthcare centers, medical officers. At the grassroots level, which is the part of this article, we have ANM, that is auxiliary nurse midwives. We have ASHA workers, that is accredited health social activist, and both of them are implementing the RCH NRHM. For ICDS, we have AWW, that is Anganwadi workers. So from this slide, what we have learned? We have learned that there are basically two kind of programs functioning between two different ministries, and these programs are divided into three important personals. The first program is divided into two, that is auxiliary nurse midwives and ASHA workers. The other program, such as ICDS, is covered through the Anganwadi workers, and both these programs are functioning to provide different needs to the rural and urban, women and child. Now, if we go through the important comparison with ASHA and other two workers, now this is how it is done. In all three categories, female are the important workers who are looking into the health parameters. ANM are taken usually from outside the village. ASHA must be from that particular village, and even Anganwadi are preferably taken from that particular village. So this is the first basic difference. The second difference is the duration. The formal education advised in ANM is 10 years, 8 years and 5 years respectively for ASHA and Anganwadi workers. They are appointed by the Health Department, Gram Sabha and Block ICDS Committee. That is the reason why ASHA workers have more flexibility given. As far as employment status are concerned, so ANM are health department employees. ASHA are just community volunteers because they are appointed by the panchayat at a local level, and Anganwadi are community based workers. The longest training is given to ANM for 18 months. The shortest one is given to the ASHA workers. The population coverage is up to 5,000 is in ANM, up to 1,000 in ASHA and Anganwadi workers. The salary of ANM is quite high as compared to the other two. Then we have supervisors. In all three cases, the supervisor also remains the female candidate. Given this discussion place, now I will leave you with this question to practice. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article appeared in Indian Express Explained section on 26th of May. An article talks about that what is the relevance and benefit of utilizing the monetary tightening through monetary policy and what could have been achieved with respect to the fiscal policy in India. Now the point is, government is quite confused between controlling the inflation and bringing the jobs. Now according to the Philip curve that was recently discussed in DNS, higher inflation simply brings more benefit to the producer. Producer will highlight that benefit in terms of corporate earnings. That corporate earnings will be reinvested in the business. More money means they will hire more people. This will increase the job creation. However, on the other side, what we see that sometimes this monetary creation or sometimes the inflation does not turn out to be correct one. The current status is the same that we have just discussed in the previous article, that sometimes because of the stagflation, rising prices not always means the rising employment. And this is the real problem which is the major concern to the government right now. So what should we do? Should we continue with the monetary policy of RBI, tightening the interest rate including the repo rate? Or should government go for reducing the taxation, increasing the demand and thereby increasing the supply in the economy and thereby reducing the prices? So the ideal answer would lie in the utilization of both policies simultaneously. Now let us analyze the article in much detail. As you can see from this diagram, we are at the current position of high inflation. The high inflation is already there. We have already achieved the double digit in the wholesale price index. Because of the higher inflation, every producer is now receiving higher prices. Higher prices would definitely mean higher business profits. This higher business profit will later on culminated into higher corporate earnings of companies. More earnings means more hiring due to investment, and more investments will simply call for more workers. So more workers will definitely lead to low unemployment in the country. However, this is just what we have already discussed in Philip curve. But the current situation is quite different from it. Now, what we are seeing, because of the initial inflation, there was definitely some kind of lower unemployment. People were getting hired, but what has happened is that the change in the wages or the salaries of people who were hired by different companies have not changed vis-a-vis the change in the inflation. Assume that the change in the salary was 10% and change in inflation was 12%. Now the difference of two has led the deterioration of the lifestyle, the living standard of the workers. Now further we have seen that this 12% has become a further inflation. This inflation has now calling for lower purchasing power. The difference in the purchasing power, as you can see here, is 2%. Now people are earning less, inflation is high, so they are not able to buy the same level of goods and services which they were buying previously. Falling purchasing power would lead to lower saving rate. Now they are spending more money on buying goods and services, therefore their saving rate of each and every individual will fall. Once the saving rate of each and every individual will fall, it will ultimately lead to the falling of saving rate at national level also. And national level, as you know, that income or national income is a summation of consumption plus saving. Once the saving component is low, we cannot rely more on the consumption because consumption is already down given the higher inflation. So both savings and consumption will go down, and it will ultimately lead to the lower GDP outcomes in the future. That is the reason why government is concerned right now. Now, should government go for monetary policy or fiscal policy? The basic difference is given on your screen. The monetary policy, which is given by the RBI, and fiscal policy is controlled by the finance ministry under central government. The monetary policy focuses on the changes in the interest rate like repo rate, bank rate and others. They actually affect the cost of borrowings by the people, business houses, or the cost of mortgage. The basic principle is that once the interest rate are higher in the market, it will reduce the borrowing limit of the homeowners, people who will benefit from certain kind of loans, let's say car loan and others. So they will defer their buying, they will defer their consumption for a while. This will reduce the excessive demand. On the other hand, the same monetary policy through higher interest rate can cause the appreciation of the exchange rate. It will have limited impact on the supply chain because it is mostly focusing on the aggregate demand in the economy. And the most important limitation of monetary policy is that when interest rates are extremely low, increasing or decreasing the rate of interest will not bear any fruitful result. And that is known as the liquidity trap. When the rate of interest are so low that people will not bother about the changes in the interest rate, then the relevance or then the efficacy of monetary policy is almost nil. Now, what we have observed in the previous article is that the current inflation in the economy is because of the aggregate supply and not aggregate demand. And that is the reason why this article has called for more focus given to the aggregate supply component. And that is the reason fiscal policy has become more relevant in the current inflationary pressure. Now, what is fiscal policy? Fiscal policy, as it is being created by the government, it focuses on the taxation and the government spending. Simply the revenue generation and the spendings of the government. Now, if government want to increase their spending, it will lead to the budget deficit. On the other hand, if it want to reduce its spending, it will create surplus budget. What will be the final result depends on the taxes which are raised. So take the current stance. Government was thinking that the prices or the inflation was high because of the higher fuel prices. Agree, but this is not the complete case. The complete case we have already discussed in the previous article. So the point is that now, as of now, government is targeting more towards rationalizing the taxation, including the GST, so that the consumption demand can be increased and vis-a-vis the supply can also be increased. It does not have any impact on the exchange rate, so interest rate are not involved, so exchange rate remain more or less the same. As far as supply side is concerned, it will affect the incentivization to the work. So let's say today the income tax is increased to 50% of your income. So you will spend less time working because you know that half of your income is already been taken away by the government, so you will not work. So higher taxation, especially the income side, reduces the incentive to work. The first limitation of fiscal policy is that it is highly political in nature. It depends on the wishes of a particular political party and how they see the economic perspective. And lastly, the efficacy of fiscal policy is advised in the cause of deep recession that happened in 1930s in United States, when a famous economist, John Maynard Keynes, suggested the government to spend money like a flood and provide money in the hands of people so that they can increase their demand and simultaneously supply can be increased in the economy. So given both these important policies, the requirement as of now is that whatever RBI has done with raising the repo rate should be coupled with the rationalization of the taxation from the government side. And together both these policies will definitely help to control the inflation given right now in the Indian economy. The important observation which was made in the article says that according to one of the study conducted by David GB, 1% of the increase in the inflation may lead to the 5% fall in the well-being of the people. And that is the important criteria to look deeper into the controlling of inflation in India. Monetary policy, on the other hand, drag down the growth. As you can see, it reduces the demand. So whenever we see that the demand has exceeded the supply, monetary policy is beneficial. But right now, as we are going through the cost push and supply shock inflation, more focus should be given towards the fiscal policy. With this discussion placed, now I will leave you with this question to practice. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. With that, we will now move to the next article for the day. This article of Indian Express Explain section appeared yesterday, that is 28th of May, and talks about the rising cases of monkeypox across the world right now. However, the article says that there is no major case of monkeypox in India. Apart from that, there is no death recorded till now in the recent outbreak of monkeypox. The biggest concern remains that there is a community spread which is being observed in the nation of United Kingdom. Now, from the perspective of UPSC, it is important for the student to go through the relevant point of monkeypox from the prelim examination. With respect to the monkeypox, how it is transmitted, how it is being spread, and what are the important symptoms along with the treatment. Apart from that, more detail of monkeypox will not be required because this is least likely to be asked in the mains examination. So let us understand the important prelims related fact of monkeypox disease in this slide. This is an infectious and communicable disease, so it can easily transfer from one person to the other. It is based on the DNA virus, unlike the HIV, which is based on the RNA virus. It belongs to the pox virus family such as chickenpox, smallpox and others, and it is part of orthopox virus. Historically, monkeypox was first identified in 1958 in the laboratory of Copenhagen, Denmark, and the first case of human transmission was observed in 1970 in Congo. The detection of the disease is straightforward as it is a skin disease. It can easily be visible after the showing of symptoms, or before that, PCR, which is a polymerase chain reaction also used for the COVID-19 detection. This PCR test can also be used for the detection of this virus. The incubation period, that is the time taken from exposure to the onset of the symptoms, is usually 7 to 14 days. The duration of the disease lasts for 2 to 4 weeks. So the symptoms, the skin infection can last for up to 28 days, after which it is likely that the symptoms of the disease will be vanished. The medium of the spread remains the handling of bushmeat, animal bite or the scratch of the infected animal, transfer of body fluids, contaminated objects and their uses, and close contact with the infected person. Skin to skin contact, most probably. Maybe a handshake or a hug might be the reason. The contrasting feature of monkeypox with that of chickenpox and smallpox is that it has a swollen gland, which is not found in chickenpox and the smallpox diseases. The prevention as of now is not available. So what scientists and the doctors are relying is the utilization of the smallpox vaccine. However, smallpox has already been eradicated across the globe. So countries, especially the poor countries, do not have smallpox vaccine right now. But the rich countries like United States and European nations have access for the generation of new smallpox vaccine, which can be utilized for the prevention of this disease, but only at 85% effectiveness. Now, the point is why this disease has become such a concern now. The cases of community spread are rising in UK and no death has been reported by now. So, from the perspective of casualty, this is not a big concern, but community spread remains one of the biggest concern of this disease right now. The relief is that there is no major case found in South Asia, especially in India, and countries, specifically the European nations, have imposed the travel restrictions from and to African continent. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with this question to practice with respect to the article we have discussed. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article appeared on page 1st of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about the hindrance which the Indian naval forces are facing with respect to India's maritime role in the international platform. The context says that Indian Navy recently has complained about the consistent delay on part of Ministry of Defence to appoint the licensed officer in India as well as Indian licensed officers abroad. Now, recently, Quad has launched a separate initiative with the term Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness. Now, please remember that this is a very important theme and could be asked in the upcoming examination in your General Studies paper 3, in the mains or maybe in the prelim examination next year. Now, what is the basic purpose of this MDA? The basic purpose is to share the information and maritime surveillance across the region. But the real issue arises when India does not have enough infrastructure as well as willpower on its institutional framework to share this information. Now, India as a rising geopolitical power would like to share the maritime information. India wants to be a leader in Indian Ocean. India wants to counter the presence of China. For that, it requires participation from the other like-minded countries. For that matter, India have to set up some institutional structure which can function and collaborate with other nations and other similar organizations for sharing of the information. But Indian Navy has highlighted certain issues on that. The first issue was the infrastructural constraint to accommodate the licensed officers who are coming from other nations to India, and delay in the posting of Indian licensed officers to the other center where naval information could be shared. Now, from the basic perspective, we will understand what MDA is all about. This MDA was recently constituted in Quad meeting held at Tokyo. So, the first prelim fact comes to our mind is that IPMDA was created in Tokyo's meeting or Tokyo Summit of Quad Nations in 2022. It was created with the basic objective to provide the collaborative working with the regional partners, and regional partners here simply means Indo-Pacific nations. The four objective of this initiative would be to respond during the humanitarian and the natural disasters such as tsunami, to combat the illegal fishing in the areas, both Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean, provide technology as well as the training to support the enhanced surveillance and share the maritime domain awareness. The last objective is the prime objective also. They want to share the information with other like-minded countries. Now, the procedure would include that there will be a stage of consultation with other Indo-Pacific nations. Regional infusion centers would be set up. One center of such quality was set up in India also. And these centers in Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia and Pacific Islands would share the information on the maritime domain. Now the point is, India has already set up Information Fusion Center or IFC with respect to the Indian Ocean region. Now this IFC IOR was set up in 2018 and headquartered at Gurugram in Haryana. It is functioning under the domain of Indian Navy, ultimately under the Ministry of Defense, and the purpose for creating was to provide the regional repository of maritime data. So this organization, this institution will collect, analyze and share the regional data of maritime information with 21 other partner countries and 22 multinational agencies for various purposes. Now the point is, as this is a regional center, India alone is not responsible for anything. India must act with other countries also, because India has a compulsion and mandatory to share the information with other countries. For that, they require license officers. Now, who is a license officer? License officer will be a full-time person who will be stationed at a particular center, in this case at Gurugram. He or she will work directly with the Indian Armed Forces and other fellow license officers, maybe from other countries, from partner nations, to enhance the maritime domain awareness. So take this example. Let's say the IFC center of Gurugram have 14 to 15 people. These people will be from different nations. Let's say US, UK, Singapore, Australia, and many others. So all these liaison officer will share the information with each other's country and will also get the information from other country on Indo-Pacific region's maritime awareness. But the point which was highlighted by Indian Navy is that these officers have not been stationed by India in other centers, and India has not even allowed the required strength of these officers to be stationed in India, lacking the infrastructure. So whether their accommodation, whether their housing, whether their stay in India has not been provided by now, even 4 years after its creation. With this discussion placed, now I will leave you with this question to practice. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article appeared on page 11 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. The article talks about that what is the basic relevance of current inflation in India and the restructuring of GST. Now, government has said that they have constituted a committee to find out into the structural anomalies. Structural simply means the structure of GST and whether to reduce the multiple tax slabs or not. For this, they have constituted a ministerial group under the GST Council. This group will be headed by Karnataka's Chief Minister Bharadwaj S. Bommai. And what this group will look into, it will provide the immediate changes as well as the roadmap for short-term to medium-term changes in the GST rate structure. Now what we have right now? We have GST ranging between 0%, 5, 12, 28 and then above it, we also have surcharge on the sin goods. Now, multiplicity of rates have created confusion. That is the reason why India has not been able to achieve a long-term revenue neutral rate altogether. That is the reason why India is calling for restructuring of the GST structure. Now, The point is, can India do the same given the inflationary pressure it is going through? So let us look into the basic detail and analysis. It will help you in the prelim examination this year, maybe the next year. It will also help you to understand the GST structure and its connection with the inflation in the mains examination. So from the economic perspective, in the UPSC examination, basic questions are not much desirable. But understanding the concepts of economy is more desirable for you in this examination. Now, why government is looking to rationalize GST? The reason being simple. Many businesses have complained that there are too many tax slabs in the country. We have already discussed many of such. Some inputs of a product are taxed more than the final product. Assume this. The wheat is taxed at, let's say, 12%, and bread that is made from the wheat is taxed at 5%. This is one of the highest anomaly that is going through in the GST structure. The next being that the revenue neutral tax rate was assumed to be achieved at 15.5%. That is the average tax rate on which government is satisfied that their tax revenue collection is at optimum level. But it is actually around at 11.6%. So the revenue which government was assuming to be collected at is less than what it is actually collecting. The tax rates are also subjective to the electoral process. So whenever there are elections in a particular state, we might see that there is a changes in the tax rate altogether. On the other hand, if we try to compare the GST structure with the current inflation, we'll find some striking evidences. The first question which should strike to our mind is GST collection all-time high? The answer is yes. Government has already crossed 1.6 lakh crore of tax collection recently. The reason which was highlighted by the government was the first two. That is, there is more compliance and less tax evasion by the people, and there is also a recovery of economic status after the COVID crisis. But the real reason has been hidden, that is, the high tax collection of 1.67 lakh crore is also through the price rise or inflation, the topic which has not been discussed previously by any government. But the article and the economic view says that rising inflation will also have a direct impact on the GST collection by the government, both at the center as well as at the state. Now the point is how inflation actually causes the issue of higher GST collection. But before moving to that, let us look into what wholesale price inflation has to say. WPI, which captures the producer's cost, has been over 10% over a year now, and it has peaked to 15.1% in April. Now assume that inflation at producer level is at double digit, what it will leave as an impact on the GST. On the other hand, the consumption has increased only 2% vis-a-vis the pre-pandemic level. Now, government is saying the tax collection is high because there is economic recovery. But economic recovery has shown that only 2% of the pre-COVID level has been observed. So let's say a person was buying 100 rupee of good before COVID. So now that person is buying 102 rupee of good after COVID. And this is without inflation. But if we combine the inflation, it will be around, let's say we add 15% more, it will be around 117%. So the real growth of consumption was only 2%. Government is saying that economic recovery has led to the higher GST collection. That is not the case. Government is looking to rationalize the GST rate vis-a-vis the inflation also, so that we can get the true picture as well as the revenue neutral taxation. Now please understand the relation between the taxation of GST and the overall prices. Now these are the two examples. Assume that the first example shows a plastic chair bought without inflation. So let's say the cost price to the producer or a shopkeeper or to the manufacturer is 1000 rupee. The GST rate applicable on the plastic chair right now is 12%. So after the taxation without any inflation, so inflation is 0, the final price with taxation would be 1120 rupees. And in this, 120 rupees will go as a GST to the government, 6% to the state and 6% to the center. Now take the another case where inflation becomes an important part. And this is also the core area of the article. And do understand this in clear terms. Now let's say there is an inflation. Now when producer made the plastic chair, it cost him 100 rupees more. Why? Because cost of plastic is high at 10%. So the plastic which the manufacturer was procuring in order to prepare or in order to produce a chair has now increased by 10%, which simply means there is an inflation of 10%. Now as the price or the cost price of chair has increased, the taxation or the GST has remained same. The overall price would be 1232. And here the GST collection would be 132. The difference would be plus 12 rupees. Now this is because of the impact of inflation on GST. That is the reason why some of the economists have said and have cautioned the government to not be so happy with their GST collection, because GST collection right now are also showing the impact of higher inflation on the cost of production in the country. With this discussion in place, now we come to the last part of today's Daily News Simplified, that is question of the day. So here is your question of the day. The answer to yesterday's question of the day was option B, which simply means that yes, Bangladesh stands best in the gender equality in South Asia. The statement number 1 was wrong with respect to the Women Reservation Bill. Today's question says that consider the following statement. The statement number 1 says that goods and service tax collection in India is not subjected to the overall inflation. The statement number 2 says India is consistently receiving revenue neutral rate of indirect tax revenue. You have to identify the correct option and comment in the comment box. That's all for today's Daily News Simplify. Thank you.